One of the two dapperly dressed gentlemen looked at the other and then at me, a little cautious, slightly smiling, and said, well, that depends. I said, well, what's it depend on? He says, it depends on the price. Oh, even more ingenue. I said, well, what would you like to pay? All right. Well, first they played ping pong with me. Then they swallowed me up in one gulp, chewed me up in little pieces, and spit me out. I went to the next place undaunted and went through the same routine. After 13, unlucky, 13 places, I noticed that every single place had the same etiquette, used the same language, comported themselves in a very similar manner. And if perchance I had had their firstborn here, and I had a revolver to the firstborn's head, and I said, now you give me the price of these gems, or I'm going to pull this trigger, they would just have smiled at me very, very graciously and let me pull the trigger. It was a secret and sacred society. No one was about to tell you anything about the price, the quality, the grading, the evaluation of gems. They were going to use your ignorance, your lack of knowledge against you in the negotiations, and they're going to take advantage of you. Okay? And it's much worse when you go to Bangkok or, I haven't been to Jaipur, but I'm told in Jaipur, in Teoflotone in Brazil, in Bogota. It's a tough business. On the 13th try, I turned to the person and I said, well, why don't you tell me, I mean, how come nobody here wants to give any information of any sort? And he turned around and he gave me a legitimate answer. It wasn't his real reason, but it was a legitimate answer. He said, I go like the other people over here, and I spend my whole life like a lawyer or a doctor gaining information. I gain information on how to grade and how to evaluate gems. And then you come in here and you ask me to give you this information for free. And I thought for a moment, and it made sense. And he was right. I don't ask a doctor or a lawyer for free. So I says, okay, well, how much can I pay you? Oh, no, I don't do evaluations. Because he wasn't interested in getting a fee. He wanted to knock me off the box. But I did think to go to an appraiser. I got a rough appraisal. I went around. I quickly sold some of those and eventually all of those gems. And since then, I've managed to sell a few more. I'll try and tell you a little about how I've done it. Okay, why does this code of secrecy exist? It exists because they want to get as much information from you with giving as little about themselves as they can. If one was a good salesman, one would want to get a lot of information also to help the customer. However, you would be giving and sharing information, and that's an essential difference between, let us say, the old technique and more modern gem merchants. Are you people aware of which hues are more valued, more esteemed? Which tones are more desirable in a particular species? How much more is one tone worth than another? What inclusions will devalue a stone? What inclusions will make a stone worth more? They're going to try and find this out from you. They're going to try and find out if you know how much of a premium you should pay to make a certain kind of set, or how much discount you should receive if you pay in advance. They want to know if you can be intimidated, how you're going to react when you enter the negotiations with them in a few moments. So they're feeling you out. How do you deal with this? Well, perhaps the easiest way is try and find dealers who don't deal that way. People who are up front, who are forward, who are more revealing, who have their prices marked on the gems, who don't make the price by looking at your forehead and seeing it written on a screen. I have to put this story in. You'll go into a trading center, and they'll show you some gems, and they'll look at you so intensely, and their eyes will almost pop out of their head, and they're looking at the muscles around your face, and particularly around your eyes. They're studying your breathing, your body posture. As someone here who's been to a trading center, a friend of mine, can testify, the price is based on what they think they can get from you. If you go and you take a packet and you don't let them open it and say, how much is this? Sometimes they'll get a little flustered and they'll say, well, you haven't seen it yet. I say, why do I have to see it? And they'll say, well, how do you know that you like it? And I'll say, well, whether I like it or not, does that change the price? Well, of course that changes the price. Well, then I don't want to see it. Okay, I'll give you a price. In some species, such as, well, hold on, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. In most colored stones, the darker tones, until the 10 or 20% of the really darkest, are the more valued. However, this is not the case in all species. I think I would like to go to the slide presentation now. Is it possible for us to kill this light over here? Hold on a moment, please.
No one's in charge of killing lights.
Are we okay? Okay. I think we have from tone 2. Okay. I think we have over here from tone 2 to tone 9 in amethyst. Actually, there's a rather intensive light. Tone 9 might be even a little darker. What we find in most species is somewhere about this tone over here, 8, or perhaps there's such a strong light, this looks more like an 8. But let's call this 7 or 8. These are usually the most valued species, most valued tones when it comes down to negotiating. However, this isn't always the case. All right, now we go and we have an example of tourmaline here. This is a very light tone over here, a little darker, and here we have right about a medium tone. This is this tone, and don't confuse it with hues. I'm assuming that you know the difference between tones and hues. That this tone over here is about ideal. And that is by far not the darkest. This is perhaps a tone 7. And it would be worth less even if it didn't have the inclusions. It's a little bit over dark. This is perhaps a tone 9 or 10, and this would have next to no value. But you have to know these things when you go in. I mean, how much difference do you think there is between, now let's go back. How much difference do we think there is between this and this? Let me give you some idea. The difference in value between this and this is a gem merchant or perhaps a jeweler.
Hold on a second. That is going in and out, this mic. Did we try this one?
Okay. All right, can you hear me?
Yeah. You know what?
I'm going to hold this. Okay.
It doesn't work. That one needs to be turned on. Okay, let's see if that works.
Okay. All right. I'm going to hold this. Let's hope it works better. The difference between knowing the cost of this, first of all, being able to grade it, and then knowing it, would be worrying about paying your bills at the end of the month and driving a luxury car. Okay? This might mean the difference over here between this and this, if you paid too much or bought quality which wasn't good enough and had to hold on to it, would be the difference between taking a vacation on a South Sea island or in Coney Island. Okay. So there's a difference. In some cases, such as amethyst, one usually calculates a premium by the weight loss plus a cutting charge. If we were dealing in a species, let's say like emerald, there would be a very significant charge put on for procurement costs because so much executive time.
I'm sorry, it's just not right. Let's try this again.
All right, put it over here.
Put this. You're too close. Now try.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Because so much executive time would be used that the gem merchant or the gem buyer, be it a jewelry store, a gem merchant, or whomever, would have to put in so much extra time to find not only the same hues, the same tones, but also the same cut and particularly the same inclusions. There would be a much larger premium for that kind of stone. You're going to have to know. I can't explain how all these premiums, how all these prices are calculated, but I'm trying to show most or a good many of the things which cause the determination of a price, of an evaluation in the field. I repeat, this is not necessarily how one forms a price for appraisal purposes. This is how it's actually done when you're buying and selling. Okay, in most species, as you may be aware, when you have inclusions, you're going to diminish the value of the gem. In some species, the opposite is true. If you people can notice over here, there are some what we call golden ponytail hairs. This is a demantoid garnet. In this species, the value is greatly increased by this inclusion over here. It's desired. But you have to know how much We have to know what increases value, what decreases value, in what way, in what species, where, etc. These are things you have to know, or don't deal in that species. Otherwise, you'll be taking your vacations in Coney Island. Okay. Let's look at how some stones are graded and something about how evaluation is actually done in the field when we're working at buying and selling. Every professional buyer goes through the type of analysis which you're going to see, whether they're working on a computer or they're working in their head. It's the same general process. I'd like to examine the system which I use and or the form which I use for analysis and the system it's based upon. It's quite similar to the GIA system, but there are one or two important differences, and there's some additional factors to consider. I don't have a transparency, and we weren't able to work something up that will appear on the screen. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to please pass some of these forms out for you to spread among yourselves. Here we go. Take a look, get an idea, pass some to the right and left. I'll pass a little back. I don't have enough, but do try and pass them around.
Do you want the overhead projector now?
I don't think this is going to come out on the projector.
Not this, but are you going to run?
I'm going to use the projector now. Okay. Okay, the first column here is quantity. Well, that's a numerical connotation, but what you would put down along with quantity would be pairs, sets, etc. Okay. Then we go to the next thing, which is species. I think species is fairly evident. We're talking tourmaline, we're talking sapphire, we're talking tanzanite. Form. Form seems very simple also. Perhaps it isn't quite as simple because there are a lot of mistakes made when we talk about form. Very simply, when we talk about form, we're talking about girdle form as the line of sight is perpendicular to the stone. We're talking oval, we're talking square, we're talking rectangular. There are a good many mistakes here. Does someone here know what a baryon is? Can someone here tell me what a buff top is? Buff top?
Cab top, faceted bottom.
Okay, cab top, faceted bottom. That would not go here. That is not a form. It's thank you. cab top, faceted bottom is a facet treatment. You would put that in notes or in a different category. If you put down, I want a buff top, you're not going to make yourself clear to the person you're communicating to. All right, we have size. Very simply, we're talking carats, we're talking millimeters. Now,
Can I ask a question? When is it you use carats and when is it you use millimeters?
I'm sorry, darling. I'm having a real problem. Say it loud.
When, first of all, I want to say that form to everybody here is face-up outline, okay, and they understand that. But when do you use carats versus millimeters?
Okay. Essentially, that's up to the person, to the giver of the order. Because sometimes they need specific sizes. This is usually when they're working with castings and they need some kind of calibration. Otherwise, it would be in carats to give you a general size. And the reason you need a general size is because gems are traded in. Well, the prices change according to breakpoints. So there are bands of price. Let's say on diamonds, a 1 to a 2 carat diamond might have, or 1 to a 1.5 carat diamond might have the same price. You go to the next break point, let's say over 2, then there'll be a price change. So, but the person is not being as specific. Again, to get into something else, the less specific you can be, the more flexibility which you give the buyer or the cutter, the easier it is for them to work and the lower your price can be. All right. So when you're giving size rather than weight, you're usually paying more money. All right. Now we're going to get into color. And you'll notice on this form, I don't have tone, hue, and saturation. Why not? Because it's simpler. Well, the GIA and some other systems use tone, form, and saturation. Why did they use it? Because it's more accurate. In today's market, especially dealing with people who are not very up on the latest developments of grading, if we go into saturation, we're causing confusion. Once in a while, particularly in pastels, we have to go into saturation because you just can't describe it any other way. But for the overwhelming majority of cases, we can go and we can explain it in tones and hues. Although I've changed tones here to mean light to dark, and I put gray and brown in with hues. And of course, gray isn't really a hue. But this is how things are more often used in trading colored stones. And over a long period of time, I suspect we'll probably everyone will be using saturation also because it is more accurate. But I'm not talking about over a long period of time. I'm talking about how things are traded today. This is about as sophisticated as it gets at the moment. In tones, I use 0 to 10. There are other systems that other people use as 0 to 100. On the systems which use 0 to 100, the intervals are usually 5. Over here, they're usually 0.5. The eye seems to pick up about 20 different hues and 20 different tones, and it varies from species to species. But this gives us a working formula to deal with. Now we go into. I think I'll stop for a moment. Is there some other question here? Go ahead.
Did I understand you correctly? Earlier you said that we were talking about tone, hue, and saturation. And you said that a particular stone, dark tone, strongly saturated, is a more valuable stone. And then I thought I understood you to say that that does not necessarily equate to to appraisal. In other words, to appraisal value, what you're going to end up writing on that final report. Why?
Okay, all right. I wasn't, first of all, I said it usually works that way up until the very darkest tones, not in all cases. And I was saying, of what I'm going to teach you here, some of the things don't necessarily immediately correlate to way an appraiser would grade, because appraisers use different systems. They use what stones have sold for over, there are two basic systems, but as I understand them, and I'm not an appraiser, they base it on recently traded quotations. Okay? In the field, you're not basing it as much on recently traded quotations. You're basing, what you're actually basing it on, and this gets a little profound, is rough, which has come out of the ground very recently and which is available to cut quantities of that type of merchandise. Now, to get to that, we have to get pretty profound. But the essential difference is that the trader in the field, particularly at the source, is basing it on replacement cost, probably directly or more likely indirectly, based on available rough. The appraiser is going through a list of recently transpired sales. And there could be a very significant difference if new mines have been discovered or other mines have dried up. Have I answered the question satisfactory?
Well, I'm just curious. I would think there'd be a direct correlation between the amount of available rough.
Okay. There's very definitely not, so let me continue on a little bit. An appraiser will go and look at a certain evaluation of a green tourmaline. And that green tourmaline sells for $100 a carat. However, he determined that by looking at sales which have transpired over the last 3 months, and he made a very accurate analysis. The man buying in Nairobi or Teoflotone is aware that the prices, they're throwing goods at him. He's also seen an enormous amount of rough stones which is coming out of a mine which has produced over 1,750 kilos of just that material, and that in the 3 or 6 months to follow, that price is going to go down very significantly. So he's not basing his purchase on what took place 3 months ago. He's basing it on what he thinks he can get it now and what's going to come 3 months in the future. Have I made myself clearer? Yeah. Okay. Okay, let's get to brilliance. When we talk about brilliance, oh boy. Can I have a volunteer? Please moisten this. Okay. When I talk about brilliance, we talk basically about 4 factors. The first factor is reflection. The second factor is refraction. Reflection, as you probably know, is the light that comes off the surface. Refraction is the light, and careful, I'm not using it in the purely scientific terminology here, but refraction is the light that comes out, which is being reflected from the pavilion facets of a stone and then actually being bent somewhat as it passes out of one density to another. What we're really referring to when we talk about refraction here is the reflected light, which comes, thank you, which comes out of stone from the pavilion facets. Besides that, we have another category, and the next category is, wait a minute, spelling it wrong. Scintillation. Scintillation is the break of light which you get in the stone. This is caused by the number and the placement of the facets on a transparent faceted gemstone. And the final category, which doesn't have a great effect in most colored stones, but has some effect once in a while, is dispersion. And that has to do with how light prismatically divides when it comes out of the stone, or the different little colors that you'll see which aren't part of the original color of the stone. Okay. Now, on the sheet, you'll see the next category is zoning. In most stones, we want as little zoning as possible. However, we want to make a notation here because sometimes in order to save money and get a lower price, we're willing to take a certain amount of zoning. Or perhaps the zoning that we'll accept will be from the bottom. It faces up even, but on the bottom we can see clear zones. The jeweler doesn't care. Maybe the collector does care. The collector's going to pay. The Argentinian doesn't care. He wants a better price. The Japanese might want a perfectly clear one, even though it's set into a bezel and they can't see it. But it's a notation that we want, and we can do it several ways, but for lack of time, I'm going to show you one way right now. Okay. Where we want zoning is in multicolored stones. Bicolor, tricolor, tourmaline, bicolor amethyst. Stones of that sort. It would be fluorite also. But we'd make the notation under zoning. Now zoning could be bands, or it could be spots, could be lines. You can determine that. I used a visual presentation there to illustrate it, and these are things which at times you're going to have to know how to communicate, particularly if you're buying from, if you're trying to communicate this over telephones, computers, facsimiles, etc. All right. Now we come into the clarity section. And here we have a very major difference between colored stones and diamonds. In the process of grading, what is the major difference between colored stones and diamonds?
Diamond's value is based on colorless.
No, how is it done? When we actually do it, what are we doing differently in the process of grading?
Unaided eye.
Okay, the unaided eye. In a diamond, we go and we're looking with a loupe. With colored stone, we're looking with the unaided eye. That's why in the field we do not use one clarity grading. It just doesn't work that way. If anyone uses that, they're going to be in trouble. I remember when I was in the business a year or 2, I guess, not more than 3. I went into a company called MK on 47th Street. I knew a fair amount. I thought I knew more than I did. When I walked in there, the gentleman said, this is a very interesting system you have over here, grading stones. Yeah, and how much do you say that's worth? Oh, that's very interesting, sir. Would you be good enough to wait here a moment? I'll be back in a little while. Well, he went out, and he came back. And when he came back, he showed me a stone. He said, would you be good enough to grade this stone for me? And I did. And I graded it. He actually came back with several, and he picked one out. He said, well, what's the difference between yours and mine? And I could see the difference, but I couldn't explain it. And I said, I can't explain any difference. He says, well, that's very interesting, because I'll sell you mine for 1/5 of what you're selling me yours for. I was embarrassed. The difference was that although both stones were flawless to the eye, his was milky. It was cloudy. It had suboptic inclusions in it. And the suboptic inclusions made it more suitable for a cabochon than for a faceted stone, although his was faceted also. If you don't know that, you're looking at an 80% loss, maybe a 95% loss. You have to know it, or else they're going to eat you up. All right. When it comes to inclusions, you can pretty much use GIA methods. Most people have some idea, and they're starting to use more of this. Our business is changing daily. It used to be, light inclusions, medium. Today we use more of this. Crystallization. Crystallization, after playing around and having used something a little different, I simply have used 0 for flawless, 10 for opaque. Okay, opaque. And it works. You don't have to use this, but you have to be aware of it. You have to use something. The essential thing is that you use what your customers understand. The people you sell to, the people your suppliers understand, the people you buy from. Someday we'll probably have this system as organized and as clear as diamond grading, which still has some discussion in it. But color stone grading is evolving now. It's very new. And you're just going to have to evolve with it. I'm just showing you the categories which have to be graded and why. All right, next category is price. Usually we put a minus sign for less than, or a plus and minus for more or less than. When we're talking about size, we use the same thing, less than, plus or less than. Ideally with size and form, we want to get just what the customer wants as exactly as possible, and the parameters, the differences in the latitude. The more latitude which we receive, the easier it is, the lower the price. The more exact it has to be, the more expensive. Okay, the last item over here is notes. Notes covers virtually everything else which isn't handled in here. And that means a buff top. It means a 4-piece set. It means that it has to be a pair, or alternate frosted facets, a brilliant crown and step pavilion, 60% color change, leave a butterfly window in. Everything else would fall into those categories. I went over some things and I didn't want to go back, and I'll touch them now so as to clarify just a little bit, and that will be right here. Okay. Here we have, let's look at the hues. We have the primary hue. I'm just going to describe it in simple terms, and these aren't too precise, but I think you'll understand what I mean. The primary hue here is an orange. You have a secondary hue. The secondary hue, which takes, and that's based on the amount of the stone that the hue takes up. The secondary hue is reddish. We have a tertiary hue, and that's yellow. This is not a hue, this is extinction. If these fine adjustments, these more gradual classifications, is what you're going to run into. These subdivisions are what you're going to run into when you get to trading in large volume with experienced, sophisticated dealers. Young man in the back.
Where does windowing come in for this? Windowing?
Window.
We got a little window over here, and in my book I have a real big window. But windows would definitely have a strong effect in grading, and that's a good thing to mention.
Are those all topaz?
Yeah, these are all precious topaz. You'll notice that there are different tones, there are different hues, and of course there are different shapes and sizes. Does someone need clarification on what primary, secondary, and tertiary hues are? Go ahead, Debbie.
So would you rank those for everybody here?
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the most valuable in a topaz. The more red you have in a topaz, the more valuable, the rarer it is. This is the second most valuable. It's easier to find, and although a lot of people may have preference for this, and you don't buy this if your order is for this, this is less expensive. This over here is the easiest to find, and it is least expensive. All these things vary from species to species, and they have to be divided into species, each species. I've tried to do that to some extent in my book. Okay. Are there more questions? Go ahead.
Which of those stones is the most valuable?
This one over here.
That's what I thought.
Okay. Why?
Because it's got the red and the orange and less of the yellow.
Right, exactly. Okay, it's a deeper tone. It has more red. Okay, and it has much less orange, very, very little yellow.
Is that extinction?
Yeah, there's extinction. This looks like extinction to me, although it might be a window. I think it's extinction. From the picture, it's not.
But it's acceptable and it's acceptable.
Yeah, that much extinction. Because if you look at the portion of the stone which is which has refracted light in it, it's fairly acceptable. This stone here that has absolutely no window. Yet, in this species, you do notice a certain amount of extinction. You can't get away without. In fact, I don't think it's possible for a stone to be really pretty unless there's very small amounts of extinction to differentiate in the scintillation. But so whether this is, presuming this is extinction, it would not make too much of a difference because the amount of extinction in a non-windowed stone is similar, although not the same. Okay? And not only that, keep in mind, the photographer had to put this at a certain angle, holding it perpendicular to the line of sight. There might be some difference. Okay. This is fun because it's an Andalusite, and Andalusite has a good deal of colors in it. All right. There's one hue, two hues, three hues, four. Let's try that again. One. Actually, more. If I want to divide it very much, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This greenish over here. So you, looking at this, you can get some idea of how many hues can be in one stone, and obviously there are different tones. This is a very light tone. This is a very dark tone. Gives us some idea.
David, just so we don't confuse everybody, you want to mention that there are 3 pleochroic colors in Andalusite, just so we don't confuse.
Okay, yeah, right. Andalusite has 3 basic pleochroic colors, and that's why you have so many hues in it. From one axis, you will get basically a green. From another axis, you'll get pretty much a brown, and from a third axis, you'll get kind of a red, and then you mix them together, and you come up with what you got there. Okay, all right. This is a pretty good illustration of scintillation. Over here, we have. Someone want to guess? Right over here.
Spinel?
That's no. This particular facet I'm talking about.
Oh, reflection.
That's reflection. Very good. Over here we have refraction. Over here we have extinction. Where we have these divisions, we have scintillation, and you can't tell in a picture, but there's an outside chance that yellow in what may be a spinel would be dispersion. Okay. Over here, well, you can see it in all the stones, and as I was saying before, I feel a little bit of extinction, which you have to have, helps differentiate the facets, and you have all these breaks of light, and the breaks of light is what scintillation is. Okay, more of the same. Okay, actually, over here, around the crown facets, you're getting a different tone than you are from the table. The table is getting a darker tone. All right. I think we can put the lights on now. We got, I think, perhaps 5 minutes left. If there are some questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Sir?
Do you buy rough at all?
Do I buy rough?
Buy rough.
Yeah, I buy rough all day.
Okay, so you talk primarily about buying cut stones today.
There's only so much one can take in an hour, yes.
I understand. But I was wondering if any of this applied to rough, or how do you...
Okay. Every single thing which we talked about here applies to rough, because when you buy rough, you are using trigonometry to calculate what cut stones will fit into the rough which you have. And then you're making the other calculations. Do I want to make that cut stone lighter or darker? How am I going to do that? I'm going to do that by the positioning of the color zones. I'm going to do that by the angles which I put on the stone. I'm going to do that somewhat by the facet treatment. But all these factors are taken into consideration when one buys rough. Next question.
Could you tell us some of the experiences you've had with buying things?
I'd love to. But I'd love to, once I get started, we're going to be here until the bar closes. So I think I'll go into that. But let me answer some of the other questions first, because I'll really go on. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, you talked a lot about the definitions of color and whatnot. What's your experience with word term color calls as far as imperial topaz or whatnot? Do you find that that's a lot of, is there a lot of that?
Vagueness? Yeah. Unfortunately for merchandising reasons and for different ethical standards, we find in different parts of the world citrine being called Bayan topaz. We find everything which is precious topaz being called imperial topaz. Not that it's easy to define, because we have well, we have discussion inside the industry where that comes about. However, my definition is when there's more reddish hue in the primary color than any other. When the primary hue is well, let me try it again. When the primary hue is red, that's imperial topaz. That doesn't mean it has to be all red, but when the primary hue is red, that's imperial topaz. Any other questions? Okay. If you like, I'm going to be telling stories for the next several hours, so I don't want to bore those who aren't interested. You have a question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering how these home shopping channels are affecting your purchasing. Selling this, their champagne topaz and their garbage Burmese rubies and their tanzanite that looks like sky blue topaz.
Okay, well.
But they're purchasing, I'm sure, tremendous amounts of rough.
Yeah, well, no, we're purchasing tremendous amount of rough to cut for them. They don't purchase rough. Okay.
What do you sell them?
Garbage, but but very heavily calibrated garbage. They are. I mean, they have to be super calibrated. So one thing.
But it's. I mean, garbage is about.
Well, not always. Okay, well, they buy a lot of they're not even interested that something is very cheap. They want something that's super repeatable, which means more available goods, which is usually cheaper. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop for a while. I'll sign autographs of any of you who've happened to bought the book, and then we'll stay around here. And if you want to hear more stories, we'll be real happy to give them to you. Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed it.